After studying this module, we shall be able to know the meaning and types of elasticity, understand the importance of elasticity, analyze the factors affecting elasticity, and measure the elasticity of supply.
Price is the pivot around which the market revolves. Price is determined by the interaction of demand and supply. We know that the law of demand tells us about the relationship between price and quantity demanded. It is, however, it does not tell us about the responsiveness of quantity demanded to price. In fact, the law of demand assumes several other things to remain constant. Since the demand curve is measured at a point of time, conceptually it is possible to assume that other factors remain constant. Amongst all other factors that influence demand, one important factor is income. While measuring demand, income is assumed to be constant. Therefore, the responsiveness of demand should be measured and understood not only with respect to price of the commodity, but also with respect to income. This leads to two types of measures of the responsiveness, namely price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of demand. As pointed out, in a given market situation, price is determined by the interaction of demand and supply. The change in price affects demand and supply differently. When price falls, demand would increase and supply would decrease. This indicates that there are two dimensions of the responsiveness: one, the direction, and two, the magnitude. Hence, while elasticity of demand necessarily bears a negative sign, elasticity of supply would bear a positive sign. This ensures the movement in the price in the market. This implies that equilibrium takes place when the price changes in the market. However, this does not ensure how much the change would be. That means that it does not ensure what is the magnitude of change. It does not ensure that the magnitude of change is commensurate. Hence, it is important also to understand both the phenomena, that is, the phenomenon of elasticity of demand and the phenomenon of elasticity of supply. It is the interaction between these two phenomena which leads to equilibrium in the market. Now, when it comes to income elasticity of demand, both the magnitude and direction are uncertain. They would depend upon the nature of the commodity. We shall study more about this as we go along. Among the factors which are assumed to be constant in the demand function appear price of complements and price of substitutes. These factors also affect demand. Therefore, it is important to examine the effect of these factors on demand and to measure the responsiveness of demand towards the price of related commodities. A firm's demand curve shows the quantity demanded of a product that a consumer wants to buy at each possible price, ceteris paribus. A change in the price of the product leads to a movement along its own demand curve. The responsiveness is known as elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand is a measure of the responsiveness of one variable, say the quantity demanded of commodity X, that is Qx, with respect to another variable, say the price of X, that is Px, and the product's demand curve shows the behavior of the consumer. It shows how much they wish to buy at each possible price, holding all other factors as constant. The response is always measured in relative terms, that is, as a percentage of the original level of price or demand respectively. By comparing the change in these two percentages, a consumer can decide how much to buy. The elasticity of demand can be divided into three categories, namely price elasticity, income elasticity and cross elasticity of demand. Responsiveness of demand, that is Qx, with respect to the price, which is Px, is known as own price elasticity. Responsiveness of demand, that is Qx, with respect to price of other commodities, which is Py, is known as cross price elasticity. Within cross price elasticity, we have the cross price elasticity with respect to substitutes and the cross price elasticity with respect to complements. And finally, we have the responsiveness of demand, which is Qx, with respect to income, which is I, and this is known as income elasticity of demand. We shall now discuss each one of these. Substitutes are goods that can be used in place of one another for the same purpose. For example, tea and coffee are considered to be close substitutes as hot beverages. The change in the price of one would lead to a change in the buying habit of the consumer. So, when the price of one product increases, the consumer tends to switch to another product. The greater the number of substitutes available in the market, the larger would be the elasticity of demand. The consumer response may be different for the price change in the market as a whole and as well as towards an individual producer in the market. If the retail price of coffee increases, then the consumer does not have much of a choice but has to pay the higher price if there is no substitute in the market. But if a substitute like tea exists, then the individual producer may increase the price of coffee. In such a case, the consumer would shift to a close substitute like tea.
Given a demand curve dd, let us consider movement along this demand curve. The elasticity of demand is a measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded, that is Qx, to a change in the price of a product, that is Px. It is also known as price elasticity of demand. In other words, the price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in. This elasticity is usually symbolized by the lowercase letter dA, such that n is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. There can be 5 possible situations while measuring price elasticity of demand, each of which has a distinct sloped demand curve and it reflects different consumer responses to a change in price. We shall discuss each of these demand curves. Perfectly inelastic demand. It is an exceptional situation where a change in the price of a product does not cause change in the quantity demanded. In this case, the elasticity of demand is equal to 0. Here, the demand curve is a vertical line parallel to the y-axis, showing that the same quantity of a commodity is demanded even when the price of the commodity increases from P1 to P2. Essential commodities like medicine have perfectly inelastic demand. Inelastic demand occurs when a change in the price causes a less than proportionate change in the quantity demanded. That is, change in the price is more than the change in the quantity demanded. In this case, elasticity of demand would be less than 1 but greater than 0. The inelastic demand curve is steeply sloped as the quantity demanded is less responsive. The diagram clearly shows that the percentage change in quantity is much less than the percentage change in price. That is, quantity demanded is less responsive to the change in price. In the case of salt, Demand cannot increase even if price falls. Neither can it fall if the price. Unit elasticity. When change in price causes the change in the quantity demanded by the same proportion, it is known as unit elasticity of demand. Unit elasticity is always equal to 1. The demand curve shows a similar percentage change in price and quantity demanded. It is quite clear from the diagram that change from P1 to P2 is equal to a change that takes place from Q1 to Q2. Ready garments are an example of unitary elastic demand. When a small change in price leads to a more than proportionate change in quantity demanded, it is known as elastic demand. In this case, elasticity of demand will be greater than 1. Leisure goods like holiday packages have an elastic demand. The slope of the demand curve is much flatter. It clearly depicts how a small decrease in price from P1 to P2 has led to a larger than proportionate change in the quantity demanded from Q1 to Q2. That is, delta Q is greater than perfectly elastic demand. When a small rise in the price leads to a zero demand situation, that is, when demand for the product ceases, then the elasticity of demand is said to be equal to infinity. In other words, when the price of a product falls by an infinitely small amount, then the consumers demand an infinite quantity. The figure shows that the new price line P2 does not intersect the demand curve. It indicates the seized quantity. When the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than percentage change in price, it is termed as elastic demand. In the case of elastic demand, the value of demand elasticity is greater than 1. Elasticity of demand has an impact on revenue. Revenue increases when price decreases when there is elastic demand. When the percentage change in quantity demanded is equal to percentage change in price, it is termed as unit elastic demand. In unit elastic demand, value of elasticity is equal to 1 and revenue remains unchanged when price decreases. When the percentage change in quantity demanded is less than percentage change in price, it is termed as inelastic demand. In the case of inelastic demand, the value of demand elasticity is less than 1 and revenue decreases when price decreases. Income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of demand for a product with respect to changes in income. It is defined as the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. For most normal goods, income elasticity of demand remains positive. It means that when there is an increase in the income level, quantity demanded also increases and vice versa. If the percentage change in quantity demanded is larger than the percentage change in income, the income elasticity of demand will be greater than unity. The relationship between quantity demanded and income can be explained with the help of a diagram. We take income and quantity on x and y axis respectively. If the income level is less than y1 level, no quantity is demanded, so income elasticity is 0. When income rises from y1 to y2, quantity demanded also increases, and it makes income elasticity positive. Lastly, when income rises above the Y2 level, quantity demanded falls from its peak point, making income elasticity negative. Normal goods have positive income elasticity and inferior goods cross elasticity. It measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded of one product to change in the prices of other products. For example, the number of cars and petrol prices. Producers of large cars find their sales falling when the price of petrol rises dramatically after oil price increases. It can be represented as ETA-XY, such that ETA-XY is equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded of product X divided by the percentage change in the price of product Y. That is, delta Qx divided by Qx multiplied by Py divided by delta Py. Cross elasticity can vary from minus infinity to plus infinity. In other words, the range of cross elasticity is minus infinity to positive infinity. The cross elasticity varies for different types of goods. Substitute goods have positive cross elasticity as against complementary goods which have negative cross elasticity. It means the quantity demanded of good X and the price of its substitute are positively related. The demand for tea with respect to the price of coffee will be positive as tea and coffee are substitutes. The demand for bread with respect to the price of butter will be negative as they are complements. The concept of elasticity of demand has immense importance in various sectors, especially in government finance. The points of importance of elasticity are price discrimination by monopolist. If the monopolist finds the demand for a product, he can fix the price at a higher level in order to maximize his net profits. And in the case of elastic demand, he will have to lower the price. Thus, the monopolist gets practical advantage from the concept of elasticity. Price discrimination in cases of joint supply. The concept of elasticity becomes of practical use where the separate costs of joint products cannot be measured. Here again, prices are fixed depending upon the elasticity. The importance in taxation policy. It is also helpful to the finance minister. He can levy high taxes on goods with inelastic demand to collect a larger revenue. But if the demand is elastic, he is not in a position to increase the tax rate. If he does so, the demand for the product will be curtailed and the total revenue will also be reduced. Importance to managers. The concept of elasticity is also of great importance to businessmen. When the demand for a product is elastic, they can increase the sales by lowering the price. In case the demand is inelastic, they can charge a higher price. Helpful to trade unions. The trade unions can raise the wages of the labor in an industry where the product is relatively inelastic. On the other hand, if the demand is relatively elastic, the trade union cannot demand higher wages without having to face a cut in the level of employment. Useful in international trade. The terms of trade between two countries are based on the elasticity of demand of the traded goods. These may be measured in value terms or barter quantity terms. Determination of the rate of foreign exchange. The rate of foreign exchange is also based on the elasticity of imports and exports of a country. If depreciation happens, the domestic exports become cheaper, but the value would increase only if elasticity of exports, E, is greater than the ones, that is, the exports are elastic. There are many factors that influence the consumer's responses to price changes. These are availability of substitute goods, essential commodities, habit or desirability, total outlay and income, complementary products, and time.
Let us now move on to the elasticity of supply. It is also termed as price elasticity of supply. It measures the responsiveness of the producer to any price change in terms of the quantity response or the quantity supplied. It shows whether the producers will supply more or less of the commodity when the market price changes. It also measures how much more or less will be supplied. That is, the magnitude of change is also measured. If producers are very responsive to price changes, then the price would be elastic. Alternatively, if producers are not responsive or not relatively responsive to price changes, the supply would be inelastic. As for elasticity of supply, there are 5 distinct elasticities of supply. In each case, there is a separate, unique supply curve that reflects the producer's response to price changes.
Essential commodities. The extent to which the commodity is necessary is another factor that determines its elasticity of demand. For example, bread, milk, and essential medicines are all necessary goods. These are needed regardless of their price. So demand is said to be inelastic for these products. So the higher the degree of necessity, the greater will be the degree of inelasticity of such products. Habit or desirability. This is also one of the factors that determine the elasticity of demand. When the consumer is habitual of some commodities, then demand for such commodities tends to be inelastic. Consumers tend to buy such products due to their habit patterns and pay quite a high price to get the desired satisfaction. These products even tend to attract a significant amount of tax as a way of collecting revenue for the government. Examples of such products are tobacco products, alcohol, and drugs. Total outlay and income. When the outlay on a good is only a small proportion of income, its demand is expected to be inelastic. In such a case, a price increase will not affect its quantity demanded. Inversely, when the outlay is large, a small price increase could affect the demand. For example, a 10% increase on a 10 lakh car is an increase of rupees 1 lakh in the price of the car. In this instance, demand would be elastic. Complementary products. While substitute goods can be used interchangeably, complementary goods are the goods that are used together. To consume one product, you must consume both. It means separately, each product is virtually useless. For example, the demand for CDs would decrease if the price of the CD player is increased. Time. Time can also affect the purchasing patterns of the buyers. For example, we tend to buy more woolen clothes and heaters in winters because it is essential to have these products. So the demand for these products in winter will be inelastic. But as the summer season approaches, the demand for these products will be elastic because the consumers will defer the purchase of these products even if there is a slight increase in their prices.
Let us now recapitulate what we have learnt in this module. The elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded with respect to changes in other variables like own price, income, or the price of related goods. Elasticity demand can be of 3 types, that is price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and cross elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of change in quantity demanded with respect to the change in the price of that product. Income elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded with respect to income. Cross elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded of one product with respect to the price of the other product.
Perfectly inelastic supply. Where a change in the price does not lead producers to supply more goods, the elasticity of supply is said to be zero and the supply curve is vertical as shown here. This holds good for natural resources that are non-renewable. Inelastic supply. When the quantity supplied is relatively unresponsive to the price changes, it is a situation of inelastic supply. The elasticity is greater than 0 but less than 1. In this case, the supply curve is steeply sloped. The figure shows that a considerable increase in price will not lead the producers to supply a large increase in quantity. This generally is the case with extractive industries like mines and minerals. Their supply cannot be increased. Unit elasticity. When a price change leads to a proportionately equal change in quantity supplied, it is a case of unit elasticity of supply. Unit elasticity is equal to 1. The supply curve is at a 45-degree angle. Any straight line supply curve, if passes through the origin ES equals elastic supply. When the change in quantity supplied is more than proportionate to the change in price, it is a situation of elastic supply. The elasticity of supply is greater than 1 and the supply curve has a flatter slope. In the case of low-cost goods like plastics, a small increase in the price will prompt producers to increase completely elastic supply or perfect elastic supply. It is a case where a change in price causes a dramatic change in supply. In other words, a change in price causes the supply to cease completely. Elasticity of supply is said to be infinite and is shown as a horizontal line. If the price decreases from P1 to P2, the supply of the goods ceases. This price is considered to be too low by the producers to sustain in the market. The main factors which determine the degree of price elasticity of supply are time period, ability to store output, factor mobility, marginal cost of production, excess supply, and the availability of infrastructure. Time period. Time is the most significant factor which affects the elasticity of supply. If the price of a commodity rises and the producers have enough time to make adjustments in the level of output, the elasticity of supply will be more elastic. If the time period is short and the supply cannot be expanded after a price increase, the supply is relatively inelastic. The ability to store output. The goods which can be safely stored have a relatively elastic supply over the goods which are perishable and do not have storage facilities. Factor mobility. If the factors of production can be easily moved from one use to another, it will affect the elasticity of supply. The higher the mobility of factors, the greater is the elasticity of supply of the good and vice versa. Changes in marginal cost of production. If, with the expansion of output, marginal cost increases and marginal return declines, the price elasticity of supply will be less elastic to that extent. Excess supply. When there is excess capacity and the producer can increase output easily to take advantage of the rising prices, the supply is more elastic. In case the production is already up to the maximum from the existing resources, the rising prices will not affect supply in the short period. The supply will be more inelastic. The availability of infrastructure facilities. If infrastructure facilities are available for expanding output of a particular good in response to the rise in prices, the elasticity of supply will be relatively more elastic. Agricultural or industrial products. In agriculture, time is required to increase the output in response to rise in prices of goods. The supply of agricultural goods is fairly inelastic. As regards the supply of manufactured consumer goods, it is comparatively easy to increase production in a short period. Therefore, the supply of consumer goods is fairly more elastic. In the case of supply of aeroplanes or any other heavy machinery, the supply is relatively inelastic as it takes time to manufacture heavy machinery.
The concept of elasticity is an important tool for decision making both by managers, producers and the government. It is used by monopolists by in the context of monopoly pricing. It is used by the ordinary producer, the competitive producer. It can be used in the context of international trade when we talk about the elasticities of import and export. It could be used in the context of foreign exchange markets, where it is very important to understand the demand and supply of foreign currency. It could be used in policy while fixing taxes and the prices of agricultural commodities. There are many factors that affect elasticity of demand, like the availability of substitutes and considerations like whether the good is a necessity or not. It is also affected by the habits of consumers, their total income or outlay or expenditure that they plan to make for a particular commodity. It is vitally affected by complementary goods as well. And one factor which cannot be ignored is the time factor. Even time is a variable which would affect the elasticity of demand, because as we know, elasticity of demand or the demand curve is measured at a given point of time. The elasticity of supply, on the other hand, tells us about the producer's response, the responsiveness of the quantity supplied towards the price of the commodity. So, once again there could be various conditions that affect the nature of the supply curve and its elasticity. So, we have discussed many cases and examples of how both elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply behave.